Welcome
Welcome
to
to Arts and
Arts and
Entertainment with Chris
Entertainment
and
with Chris
Randall.
and Randall. I'm Chris,
I'm Randall.
and welcome to our show. Every episode, we discuss different parts of arts and entertainment. We use that term because some people like, high art, and sometimes we talk about lowbrow and middlebrow and
Hey,
everything in between.
Chris, the postmodernists said there's no difference between high and low art. Sorry. You're like 30 years.
Really?
You're 40 to 50 years behind the times.
Then
Postmodernism.
the title of our show has been deconstructed by you. You have deconstructed. You are the Jacques Derrida of this show, where I'm an old school structuralist. Well, for those of you at home, all right. That's the worst. Can you do it better than I can? Try. No.
Okay. What is it? All right.
Oh, that is so much better. And the reason I had Randall do that, because I suck, is today's the Matthew McConaughey. Today we are going to show you how to have your own film festival at home, because we're going to do a film festival retrospective on Matthew McConaughey. Why Matthew McConaughey, Randall, do you ask?
Yeah, I did ask.
You did ask.
You never answered my question.
And I never
you have yet to answer it.
So,
this show is your idea. You want to do a show of Matthew McConaughey?
This show is totally my idea. Yeah.
Because
Today, it's my show because I think to myself, there's a couple things. First off, you're home. You probably have a couple streaming services, and
you're thinking of Matthew McConaughey all day.
Well, he's a great actor. And what we're going to show you first is just if you're by yourself, or maybe with your loved ones, or your family, or friends. Each way you do this is different. But the nice thing about Matthew McConaughey is he's got a career that spans over a quarter of a century. He does independent films, he does mainstream films, he does science fiction, he does Western, he does romantic comedy. He does so many different kinds of movies that there's at least one Matthew McConaughey or two Matthew McConaughey films for everybody in your house. And as long as you've got any of the major streaming services, we can find you at least one Matthew McConaughey film. And if you can rent, wow, that was really terrible. If you can rent on YouTube or Amazon, we can even find you a few more. So what I would suggest you do is you would go and watch these movies. You can also watch a couple of really great interviews with Matthew McConaughey on his process. On YouTube, he did a 1-hour interview at the Lincoln Film Society at Lincoln Center. It was recorded back in 2016, which is pretty much everything he's done up until the last 4 years. And he goes into great depths about his process, how he works in film. And you can watch that at any point, and you can see what his take was when he was working on those films. So,
hey, could I just add something?
Go right ahead.
I don't know why, but over the years, yes, I too have watched many interviews with Matthew McConaughey, even Actors Studio stuff. Stuff about him acting, and every time he does the interview, it's fun. I mean, the guy just I don't know, how do you say it? He's straightforward. He's honest. I mean, I remember years ago he gave his Oscars speech. Was it his Oscars acceptance speech?
Yeah.
It was like a rambling. It was just completely rambling, and everybody made fun of him for it. But it's because the guy he's trying to be honest all the time. I mean,
he can be I don't really care about him on like the regular interview shows. If you want to watch him on Ellen or the Tonight Show, you sure
well, that's
can.
Not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like his real interview.
But his real interviews are good. He did something on acting where he interviewed Jeff Bridges, and that was when Jeff Bridges did a movie called High and Low. And then Matthew McConaughey had just done Mud. And sorry, I got the Jeff Bridges film wrong. It was a neo-noir Western that came out about 4 years ago. Do you remember it?
Talking about the John Sayles movie? He's the sheriff?
No, I'm talking about Jeff Bridges for a sec.
Oh.
I don't know. This movie with Ben Foster where there's two brothers who go on the lam and Jeff Bridges has to hunt them down.
Oh. That was kind of recent, right?
Yeah. Anyway, there's a really nice one where Bridges and McConaughey basically talk to each other about their own films. McConaughey talks to him about his stuff, and Bridges that's a pretty good. There's a few. If you Google just Matthew McConaughey acting. Did you know that he is right now a full professor at his alma mater at UT Austin, where he now teaches a class on acting from film to stage?
Who are you talking about, Jeff Bridges or Matthew McConaughey?
Matthew McConaughey.
So he's actually teaching there right now?
He's been teaching for a long time, but he is now on their faculty as a professor
Where's this
of
at?
acting. Austin, UT Austin. So yeah,
he's a pretty normal guy. I mean, that's one of his interesting qualities. I mean, with Tom Cruise, can you imagine Tom Cruise going back to his old alma mater or something and teaching an acting class? I really can't.
I don't know. I think he has interesting things to say, but I think he hit on something, which is, and we're going to get to the films in a moment, but I do think that Matthew McConaughey is, in very sense, a quintessential American actor. He is absolutely a product of both a very particular part of the American culture, and I think he's also a part of a particular generation. He was born in 1969, so he's just between you and me in age. He's 4 years younger than me and about, 5 years older than you?
I don't know. I'll look up how old he is while you're talking.
He was born in November of 1969, so he's 50, going on 51.
Okay.
And I feel that he is very much a Gen X actor, and he is very much an American actor. And I don't think it's always true. Like, for example, I think that a contemporary of his would be Matt Damon. Matt Damon is absolutely very much a quintessential American actor, but I don't really think of Matt Damon as a Gen X actor. I really think of Matt Damon as the kind of American actor who would be an American actor in any decade in history. That makes sense to you?
So you think Matt Damon is timeless, is what you're saying?
No, I just think that there is no he's an American actor too, but I don't think there's anything particularly generational in his sensibility. He does not have, I would say that someone like Owen Wilson or Robert Downey Jr., much like Matthew McConaughey, they have a generational sensibility. There's something about our generation as actors that really comes across in those particular actors that don't come across in a Ben Affleck or a Matt Damon.
I'm going to say this about McConaughey. I mean, McConaughey's different than most of these other actors, I think, just in terms of temperament. I mean, he's different from almost all American movie star actors in the sense that when I went to film school at USC, okay, one of the professors there, he liked to make the distinction between stars and actors, and there were some actors. This is like a film studies type thing. It's like they like to make distinctions between stars and actors, and some stars are actors, and I mean, because a star is part of the studio system. It's like a star is somebody that's a brand. They bring people into the theater, right? So Tom Cruise, Will Smith. These people are stars, right? And they're always the same. They always play the same character, right? So they're actors, but they're not really acting. They're just playing themselves. And they brand the movie. They bring people in. But somebody like a Matthew McConaughey, he I don't know if he is a star, but I don't know if he brings the people in. But you know what? He has threaded the needle in a way that almost no other American actor has been able to. No American star actor has been able to, where he does pick parts where he gets to act, and he tries to act, and that's the interesting thing about him is he. Well,
I think you've picked
he has
up
a
on
lifelong
a
love of acting. What?
He definitely loves his craft, and I think you're right. I think it is fair to say, and we're going to start in a second, that he does thread the needle because Matthew McConaughey does both. He does both. I would call mainstream American movies, big commercial films, and he does do small blockbuster, small independent films. Sorry. So in that sense, he is really he really threads that needle. And I would say there's a good question. which is you do have certain actors who get lost in a role. There was a time where Gary Oldman, it was like a running joke. Whoever Gary Oldman would play, you would never know who he was because he'd get so lost in his part.
Well, he's a perfect
Meryl
example
Streep
of an actor, not a star.
Lost in his part. I will say, then there's other actors like Will Smith, who you're right. Every time you see Will Smith, it's almost there's a few where he really does get lost in a part. I'm not going to be rude, but often it's very hard to see behind what is Will Smith. McConaughey definitely has a certain kind of archetype, I think, but of a certain type of guy that he does play.
Really, I don't agree with that. Tell me what type you think it is.
Let's look at these films and let's look at it in chronological order. And
I just want to say one more. I just want to say one more thing about McConaughey is if you do listen to some of his interviews about acting, over the years, he even talks about it. He is one of these rare. I would say he's one of these rare artists, in any kind of artistic field, who is always trying to improve himself and always trying to improve his craft, and when he talks about acting over the years, that's what he talks about. He talks about how
let's look at
he has tried, he's strived to become a better actor over the years. He has seen his own work as deficient over and over.
Okay, well, let's explore that. Let's actually explore two things: the arc of his career as an actor, and whether or not Matthew McConaughey really is just playing a type, a particular kind of dude, or if there's more to it than that. Actually, he has done a movie, we're not recommending it, called Surfer Dude, which came out in the 90s. And then 20 years later, he did another film called Beach Bum. So there is.
I haven't seen either of those, by the way. I haven't, he did a bunch of movies. He did a bunch of movies, like a string of movies where it was basically like just cash-in movies he played like the McConaughey type. I haven't seen hardly any of those.
Let's do the chronology because I think it helps. And I would say the first film that he did that I think got on many people's radar, it's not even a very big part. And the only reason I'm even bringing this film up is because you can actually watch it if you've got Stars. You can rent it, but it's free if you've got the Stars channel. And that is the 1993 Richard Linklater film, Dazed and Confused. Filmed in Texas. It would begin his long-term career with Richard Linklater. But of course, that great line, right?
Which
Say
line?
it again.
All right. Is that
there's that great line? Oh, and then there's the other great line.
Was it High School Girls?
Yeah.
They, I get older, but they stay the same age.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
that's totally pedo, Chris. That's some pedo shit.
Yeah, but it's interesting because there's an interview with him when he talks about his approach to his craft. And what he does is he looks for the lines of dialogue to inform the characters he's playing. And that, he said, was the jumping off point for that character. It's a very small part. Dazed and Confused takes place on the day before graduation in a high school in 1976 in Texas. And he plays one of the only characters who's not a high school student. He plays, what would you say, like the older dude who's still hanging out at the high school, who's still like partying with the teens. He's
trying to have sex with all the teen girls, and that's like a very 70s kind of character. I mean, I don't know if that kind of person could even exist today. That kind of person would be in jail today, I think. But in the 70s era,
in the 70s, and I remember
the free love
80s,
era,
he totally existed. I'm almost afraid to think that he may well have that guy still does exist, but it's a small role. I don't think
he exists.
He's in the movie for more than a total of 5 minutes. His character's name is Wooderson. And that is it. Doesn't even, I think it's Dave Wooderson, if memory serves me right. And that is, it's one of those things where if you ever watch a comedy, a large ensemble comedy, and you go, oh yeah, who is that guy? Because they just stick in your head.
See, here's the thing about that is that's considered his breakout role. Okay. Now, if you look at
it was considered his first, it wasn't a breakout role. It was the first time you see him. His first breakout role, I would argue, is A Time to Kill. where he's the lead. And I don't have this here on the list because right now you can rent it, but it's not available on any streaming service.
I don't even think I've seen that, but
that was a 1997 John Grisham novel. It was where he plays, it's Samuel Jackson, Chris Cooper, and Matthew McConaughey. It takes place in the South. Samuel L. Jackson kills a guy, and Matthew McConaughey plays his lawyer. There's more of a backstory. I don't want to spoil it out, but it's the first time that he's playing a straight arrow protagonist. The lawyer who's going to save the day and have a heart of conscience. It's a very Gregory Peck role. It's the kind of role that, I hate to say it, it's a very cookie cutter role. You could have put any A-list actor over the age of 25 and below the age of dead, and they would have been able to play that part. I'm not saying it's a bad film. I actually think it's got some great acting. I want to say I think it's a great film.
Yeah, well, it's it's a genre movie. It's based on a book. I mean, it's a attempt to make some money. Whatever. It's a very commercial role. But I want to say about his. I know you don't say it's his breakout role, but I really do think that's his breakout role. That's the role, Dazed and Confused, where people started noticing him, and he got all his work off of that. But I want to say something interesting about that role. I mean, if you think of other actors in their breakout roles, like Brad Pitt, okay, is a good comparison in Thelma and Louise. What does Brad Pitt do that's memorable in Thelma and Louise? He takes his shirt off, I mean, in McConaughey's breakout role, he's taken a lot of chances with his character. I mean, he constructs a character that's basically a pedophile, and
that's a very good point.
And he's never gotten crap for it. He's never gotten crap for it. I've never heard anybody getting crap for it.
Actually, this is a very good point, Randall, which is he plays a vulgar guy, a vulgar, hedonistic Cypriot, a guy who just is a dude who, in the real world, we would always think of as sliminess. And yet he finds a lovability. And I will say, that's the first time we see it, but that particular calling card of his style, that particular thing in his deck, he pulls it out many times over the course of his film career.
Well,
in fact, that's probably why I'm not a big fan of The Time to Kill. It's because you don't see any of that in his performance.
Well,
you don't see any of that roguish
Well, I think what's important about that role, or what's striking, is that he is willing to take a big chance in Dazed and Confused and play a character like that, especially when nobody knows who he is. I mean, if you're so like an actor like Brad Pitt, who starts out in Thelma and Louise, all he does is be hot looking in Thelma and Louise. I mean, what is Matthew McConaughey takes? I mean, when people remember Brad Pitt and Thelma and Louise, they just remember him for being hot, right? And then when people remember Matthew McConaughey from that role, they remember his character.
Well,
it's about risk taking. Matthew McConaughey is someone who takes risks.
He is a risk taker, and he plays dark.
Other actors don't do that.
I get you, man. Well, there's not a lot of the 1990s that I don't actually have any films from his early first decade that I was recommending, because the ones that I like from that period right now are not available on a streaming service, though some of them are at least available if you want to rent on either Amazon or YouTube. And I will say that probably my favorite fuller performance from that decade is from the same year that he actually did in 1997 and 1998, around the end of his career, of the decade. He did a few films, 95, 96, that are really worth at least briefly speaking about. One of them is the 1996 film Lone Star. It's a John Sayles mystery.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
It uses it takes place in the present day 90s, but there's a backstory in this small Texas town in the 1950s, or maybe it's the early 60s. And he plays this very complex, morally complicated man named Buddy Deeds, who's the local sheriff. It's almost a very noir performance. It's the first time that you would see him play a villain, the darker version of him. And it is a very you're going to talk about another film in a little while. I don't want to tip it too much, but it's a great performance if you can watch it. Lone Star. It also stars Chris Cooper, who that same year do A Time to Kill with. And that's when you realize he also is really good with a sense of menace and malice. That same dark quality in Buddy Deeds is, if Buddy Deeds is charming, the charm underlines the menace. Here in Lone Star, the menace becomes greater than the charm. And it's quite a riveting performance.
So he's
also
willing to play villains. I mean, that's another interesting thing about him, right? There's
also the 1998 film that he did with Richard Linklater, The Newton Boys, which is one of the few Westerns it's not a Western, but it takes place in the 20s, where he's a part of a family that robs banks. It's one of the few period films he does. The previous year he did Amistad. It's a great performance. He's working with Steven Spielberg. It's probably the most close you'll ever see him do period work. They're fine. Did you ever see Contact with Jodie Foster?
Oh yeah, I've seen it. That's a great movie.
What'd you think of his performance in that?
I don't even remember it. What did he do in Contact?
Exactly.
Jodie Foster was great in Contact.
He was in Larger Than Life, which was that Bill Murray movie about an elephant.
Really? I didn't even know that.
I didn't see Ed TV, and I would like to, because actually I hear it's a very good film. Did you ever see that, the Ron Howard movie?
No.
Where he's being followed by a TV crew?
No. What's the IMDb on that? I don't think it's very high.
Maybe not. It's his first working with Woody Harrelson. And then as soon as the 2000s begin, I think really at the beginning of the decade, 20 years ago, he's a mainstream actor. And he starts doing very mainstream things like U-571, which is actually, again, not something that you can stream right now. It's a submarine thriller set in World War II. It's pretty good stuff. Is
that a remake of Das Boot or something like that?
No. It's based on a story completely stolen, where how the British stole the cryptology, the Enigma code machine from the Germans during World War II on a submarine. And instead of it being a British submarine for the movie, it's an American submarine, and it stars him and Harvey Keitel. It is, again, much like Time to Kill. It's not a bad performance. It is very much what I would call a very mainstream leading man performance. And that's kind of where you find him at the beginning of the decade in The Wedding Planner. He starts doing a string of romantic comedies. Have you seen any of his romantic comedies?
I don't think I have.
I saw The Wedding Planner.
Obviously, that's not what I'm into.
And I thought he was fine. That is certainly where you get to see him playing a charming guy. It's weirdly enough also in the few movies where he just plays a normal guy. His hair is the regular length. He shaves. He has a normal person's job.
For like 10 years or so, he just made all these cash-in movies where he just played the leading man and just like genre stuff.
He goes back and forth all the time. I don't think that ever stops. But
I think he was the right age at that moment, and his career was hot. Yeah. And
he was in his 30s.
He cashed in.
So it was the age that you do romantic comedies when you're a good-looking young man. This is when he makes People Magazine's Sexiest Man of the Year. Then he does like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I'm not a fan of it. My girlfriend saw it. She says terrible. And then we get to a movie, again, not really a recommended movie, but I know it's a movie you like. Maybe you recommend it, which is Sahara. 2005.
That's a funny movie because I guess a lot of people consider it some kind of like Raiders of the Lost Ark clone nowadays, generic Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I guess it was based on a book series.
Clive Cussler, yeah, it was based on he plays Dirk Pitt, which is a character from the Clive Cussler series,
right?
He goes looking. Go ahead.
When you read about it, they put a lot of money into it. There was a lot of hopes. There were a lot of hopes that it would become like a movie series. It would be a franchise thing. So McConaughey was really trying to cash in then, because I think he was going to be a lead character in this whole series of movies.
Yeah, there was a giant lawsuit about it. But is it a good film? Is it even a good performance?
You know what? I guess the best you could say about it, it's an okay film. I mean, there are spectacular scenes, because I think the budget. They went way over budget. They shot it in Africa, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful looking movie. There's a lot of great action sequences, but I don't know. It's just it's not that it ends up not being that memorable. I mean,
Yeah, and
it's fun to watch, sure. I mean, is McConaughey good in it? Sure, he's good in everything. But
it's a generic McConaughey. That same year, he does 2005. He does Two for the Money with Al Pacino, and I just remember it being a very dull film, failure to launch. I've heard that We Are Marshall is a good film. That's from 2006. I never saw it. Did you? Though, if you like sports films, it's a true story about a football team, and it's a good story. A lot of people like it. And again, if you're doing a film festival and people like sports films, this is about a team that dies at Marshall University, and they have to restore a new team in its place. And that's a kind of film that a lot of people like to watch. Then he does Fool's Gold. Again, it's not really until 2008 that I really can tell you there's a movie from this decade, the first decade, that I think, man, he's kind of really good. And it's not even a great performance. It's just a very funny movie, which is Tropic Thunder. And Tropic Thunder, you can watch. It is available to rent on is it on Amazon? You have the list. You've seen Tropic Thunder, haven't you, Randall?
yeah, that's one of the all-time great comedies. Did Ben Stiller help write it? He stars in it, right?
Yeah,
And,
Ben Stiller wrote it, directed it. The role was originally going to go to Owen Wilson, but Owen Wilson had tried to commit suicide because he was very depressed after having broken up with Kate Hudson. So that is an interesting little backstory. But I mean, it's a very funny movie.
you
Do
know,
you
I'll,
remember anything about McConaughey's performance in that film?
no, I don't remember what he played in that one.
He's the straight man to Tom Cruise in that film.
I'll say another weird thing about it is, so you talk about Owen Wilson. He has to replace Owen Wilson, who had all these personal problems.
Yeah.
McConaughey, he barely has he had any personal problems? I mean, the guy is so normal, isn't he? I mean, he got arrested for being high on pot one time. I remember.
That's pretty much it. He's
who hasn't gotten in trouble
smoker.
for being high on pot before?
He's a pot guy, but in
he's
this
so
movie,
normal,
he's just playing a very straight arrow studio guy, and I don't know. It's a great movie, and it actually, you know what? I'll give him credit as a performer. In this movie, it's the only time you're ever going to get to watch Matthew McConaughey be the straight guy to some amazingly funny people. You know, Steve Coogan, Jack Black, Robert Downey Jr., Ben Stiller, and a very, very funny character performance by Tom Cruise as that middle-aged producer. And it does show. I mean, I think it's a very hard thing in acting to play the straight man, to be the person who stands in for the audience is going, hey, I'm normal like you, and what the hell was that? I mean, it's a lot of reaction. He really is the character that is the closest to normal in a film full of unusual people. And to get him as that guy, and in that sense, he does a really great job of being normal. And it does show you that a lot of he has range, range that we don't normally talk about.
Out of all these people, he's probably like one of the most normal people. You know, if you go in and look at his biography, you know, he in the beginning of his life, he talks about in interviews, he just wanted to be an actor. He wanted to be a movie star. So like he was in Texas, I think it was, and there was a movie shooting. He's told the story before. There was a movie shooting in his town, and he was like trying to find the casting director, and he saw the casting director in a bar or something. He just went right up and said, hey, I want to be a movie star.
Well, I mean, he did acting in college. His first, he did a commercial for the local newspaper. He did, you know, he was on an episode of Unsolved Murders, and that's when after that he got Dazed and Confused. But
I'm saying he's not like Ben Stiller. Okay, so Ben Stiller's Hollywood royalty. You know, his mom and dad were working in the industry and all this. I mean, he's like a normal guy who just. He wanted to be an actor, you know, and that's it. And he stayed normal as far as I could tell.
I would just say that it's an interesting thing to watch him in Tropic Thunder play what I would argue is probably the most normal guy he'll ever play without being dull. because I think a lot of the problems I have with the first decade, the first of the 90s and definitely the first decade of the 20th of the new century, McConaughey performances, he feels to me a bit reined in. And that exciting wild guy from Dazed and Confused that you kind of see pop up in the films we just mentioned, I think, strangely enough, doesn't come back until the second decade, just the last decade that came by. And I honestly will argue this last decade, the decade that really saw him go from being 40 to 50, this is really where he comes into his own. And the first movie that I want to really recommend from that decade that you can watch on, it is available on Hulu, is The Lincoln Lawyer. Did you ever see The Lincoln Lawyer?
I may have. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about it. I'm a big fan of Michael Connelly. Michael Connelly is a crime writer. The Lincoln Lawyer he wrote at the beginning of the century, and it was to launch a series of books. And Mickey Haller is the character he plays, and he is an attorney. But unlike the straight-arrow attorney that he played in John Grisham's A Time to Kill, this is a guy who is a bit more older in life. He's had a failed marriage. He has problems with his kid. He's not it's much more tailored to the kind of guy that we're going to start seeing McConaughey play more of, which is guys who are just, they don't really have it all together. They're very good at one thing and they're very crafty at other things. And this, the reason it's called The Lincoln Lawyer is because he operates his law firm out of his car, his Lincoln Town car. And he even has to team up with he actually uses an Aryan, I think it's an Aryan, a motorcycle gang. He actually uses them to help him do his dirty work. He definitely plays a very, I'm not going to say it's a noir because it's not all the way noir, but it is definitely, first off, it's a good film. It has much more of an edge to it than his previous performance. It's a slightly edgier movie in general. But if you do like those kinds of things like John Grisham novels, it's a pretty solid mystery. Ryan Phillippe is in it. How he goes about solving this crime and using the law. It's one of the few really good legal thrillers where they don't cut out the law to make it interesting. So I would recommend highly The Lincoln Lawyer, available on Hulu 2011. I think this is also around the same time, the same year, also on Hulu, also 2011, is a McConaughey film that you saw that I've not seen, but very excited to see. And I will watch soon, now that I realize it's available on Hulu, which is Killer Joe, the Tracy Letts play that was made into a film by William Friedkin.
I think there's a story behind Killer Joe. I mean, it's a little indie movie. I mean, they made it out of a play, right?
Yes.
And if I remember right, the play was done at this theater in Chicago for a lot of years.
Yeah, it was part of the Steppenwolf Theater.
Yeah, and the guy, the guy, there's like some coercive sex in the play, and I think there was a guy in the play that, like the director and one of the actors of the play at this theater was got Me Too'd, and people were saying that he was trying to, he was doing all sorts of nasty stuff on stage, and he was trying to spin out his actresses are saying this, right, that he worked with. He was trying to go after them off stage and all this. So I mean, so what I'm saying is,
what are you saying?
There's a lot of crazy stuff in Killer Joe.
Yeah, but
there's a lot of crazy sex stuff in Killer Joe. Juno Temple is in it. Juno Temple is in it, and if you know anything about Juno,
but
let me finish. If you know anything about Juno Temple, she's always crazy in all her stuff, and this is one of her craziest parts. She gets totally naked. Matthew McConaughey is a total scuzz bucket, and he's great. And it's just an entertaining watch, I mean,
but you want to tell us a little bit the premise of the film?
No.
So it's not just come watch Matthew McConaughey be a scuzzbucket.
Yeah, okay. Just watch him be a scuzzbucket. Watch Juno Temple.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about the movie because I think people have a right to know. So it's about this boy who he owes money, right, about $5,000, and he conspires with his father, I believe, to knock off his mom, who's divorced from his dad, to get money in the will. and because he doesn't have enough money to pay the assassin, which is the McConaughey character, Killer Joe, it basically offers his sister, who's played by Juno Temple, as collateral. I got that right?
I don't even remember because, like, you know what?
I looked it up.
The plot is not that important. This play movie is like, it's all about these crazy scenes that happen. I mean, you're just basically, this is one of these things where you're just waiting for another crazy thing to happen. It's
a very controversial film because it got very mixed reviews. Some people really loved it. Some people really hated it. But everybody cites that McConaughey's performance in this as this dark, malevolent character is riveting. Is that true?
Yes. Well, McConaughey's great in it. He plays a bad guy. There's nothing, I don't even think there's anything redeeming about the character he plays. And, I was going to say this about when you were talking before about McConaughey is, all the roles he plays, he's able, he's really able, this will go into the next project. He's really able to construct a character, unlike a lot of other actors working today. I mean, he is able to, from the ground up, create like this core of normalcy because he understands normalcy because I think he's normal. He grew up as a normal person. So he puts a core of normalcy in all his characters and he constructs them from the ground up, making an actual person, And so like in Killer Joe, one of the reasons his bad guy is so good in Killer Joe is he does seem very normal a lot of the time. And then he's not.
Is that again kind of like his character in Dazed and Confused, where there's just a certain degree of charm that makes
because in Dazed and Confused,
disturbing about him, weirdly enough,
right?
work.
That's another good example. Dazed and Confused. So like the character in Dazed and Confused, he's just some normal dude that he's a guy that likes to hang out and drink beers and hit on women, girls maybe, and but McConaughey understands a person who just likes to sit around and drink beers. You know what I mean? Tom Cruise played a character like that in Born on the 4th of July.
Yeah, that's a great performance. It's one of my favorites.
It's a good performance, but the scenes where Tom Cruise just has to be a normal guy, he doesn't strike me as very normal. You know what I mean? Because Tom Cruise is not a normal person.
Well, that's a good point about McConaughey, that he can really be very comfortable in the body of who he's playing.
Well, he understands just being normal. And I'll tell you something else. Okay, so here's a perfect example. Okay, so let's fast forward to Magic Mike.
No, not yet. Not yet. We are going to get there in a minute.
All right, but it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The way he constructs a character.
Well, then hold that thought because we're going to get to that. I promise. But I just want to hold that thought, which is I think that it's a weird year because he also, if he plays like a lawyer who's kind of a failure of a human being but a great lawyer, and then in Killer Joe he just plays an out and out villain. He did one more film in 2011. That I'm recommending that you can watch, where he actually plays a straight up hero. And that film is called, hold on, I have to switch this over. And that is called Burning, which is also directed by Richard Linklater. It stars Jack Black. Jack Black is a guy who marries a very wealthy heiress played by Shirley MacLaine. And Matthew McConaughey is the very eccentric Texas detective who has to solve the crime, has to go up against Bernie. He knows Bernie's up to no good, and yet he is, and it's very interesting because it's completely, he's idiosyncratic, he's charming, he's witty, but he is very much a white knight in that performance, as opposed to the two performances we just talked about. If you stacked up those three roles just in a single year, you really have a remarkable range for one actor, is what I'm saying. Did you see Bernie?
Yeah, I saw it, but I don't remember Matthew McConaughey being in it. So it's...
then I guess you don't remember it too well, because...
It's not a very memorable movie to me.
Well, I would recommend it. Thank you for dissing the movie that I'm recommending to people. That's fine. You're willing to do so. I can't recommend Killer Joe because I haven't seen it, and I honestly don't know how offensive it may be. But if you want to watch Bernie, it's on YouTube. It's free with commercials. And it's an oddball. It's an oddball performance in an oddball film whose tone is completely the opposite of the more menacing and noirish films that we just mentioned. And now we can go to the following year, which is maybe also another amazing year in his career, and that 2012. Tell us about Magic Mike, where he plays.
Okay, but let's cut for a second. How about you can't use your headphones anymore?
I can't because I have to. It's the same thing I'm using to charge my my iPad, and my iPad is about to go, so I have to charge my iPad.
Okay, I'll just talk about Magic Mike. So Magic Mike is a good example of what I'm talking about when it comes to McConaughey and him being a really good actor, just able to construct a convincing character, characters that seem like actual people. So if you watch Magic Mike, now Magic Mike's the kind of movie that, you know, it's a cash-in movie. You know, everybody's just going to phone in their performance, except for like one guy, Matthew McConaughey. Now maybe.
No, I think you're thinking of the sequel. I think actually Magic Mike is just the opposite. It's
They're
a
both
very good
just as
Steven
bad.
Soderbergh film. I disagree with you. I think Magic Mike. I could not do the true story of Channing Tatum. It is exactly what he did for a living before he became an actor.
Yes, I understand that.
A lot slicker. It should be a very bad film, and yet at the same time, it isn't. It's a very. I disagree with you. It's a very compelling film. These guys are very likable. They're very interesting. It has a certain authenticity. The character of Dallas. It's a very. I'm not going to say that he's a. I think that sometimes an antagonist isn't always a villain as much as it's the character who forces the protagonist to grow. And I definitely feel like that's what Dallas is. I think Dallas is, he challenges. It's a weird deal to say, but it's almost him as a mentor, you know? It's a strange movie for him to be a mentor in, but you buy it. Buy that this is the man who knows what he's doing for a living.
Well, his character may have been actually the best written character in the movie, which is, makes it easier for him. But yeah, I mean, if you watch it, you will see, I think, that he took the time, or maybe he had the skill to construct the character, and nobody else could do anything with that material. I mean, everyone else in that movie is terrible compared to him, and you can see the contrast. You can see the contrast between him acting and the other people acting. It's almost like. That's actually, if you're interested in acting, that's practically like taking an acting class, because you can see bad acting next to good.
But I'll say this much: in it, you really do. It's one of the few times where you really go, "I wonder what it'd be like to be a male stripper, a male exotic dancer," and like he's so committed to it. There is such a sense of he's not just playing a guy who's comfortable in his own body, which is something he's always doing. But he's playing someone who's critical, someone who is intellectual about what he's doing, and very, very focused and very much sharp. And also still that sense of malice and sense of foreboding, which is still his deal. I'm going to talk about a film I just watched on Netflix. I think is a really underrated movie and a great Matthew McConaughey performance from that same year, and it's called Mud, M-U-D, Mud. Did you ever see that film?
Yeah, I watched it years ago when it came out. I wasn't that into it.
Okay, well, that's okay. You don't have to like everything.
It was just kind of slow moving, I think, for me.
Can I tell people what the movie's about?
Yeah.
So, okay, it's, and I can see why some people don't like this film, because it's a child's film for adults. So in this film, these two boys who live on riverboats in the Mississippi, and by the way, they go out to an island and they find a boat stuck in a tree, and they find this strange man living in the boat. And basically, the name of the character is Mud. He's there. We don't know why he's waiting. He has a suspicious past, and they get involved in helping him in his endeavors. And it to me almost was kind of like a cross between Mark Twain and film noir, especially the character he plays, because you can't always tell if he's a good guy, a bad guy. Eventually you find out he's not as bad as you think. But he's so... It's very nuanced. It's an interesting biographical piece. Matthew McConaughey's dad is from Mississippi.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he did not have to go very far into his own toolkit. And it's not the last time that he'll reference his own father for building a character. And it's a very good movie. It stars him, Reese Witherspoon, Sam Shepard's in it, Don Baker. It's another good crime story, good thriller mystery. There's a real tension. It is, again, more of what I would call the dude character that he plays so often. But this is the dude with consequence. Normally, all the guys that he'll play in like a Failure to Launch or even in Dazed and Confused, there's no consequences for what they do. Whereas in Mud, you get to see how consequences would affect a guy. And then we get to 2012, and it's really his great film, which is Dallas Buyers Club, which is, you can watch this on Netflix. It's a hard film because of the subject matter. It deals with AIDS in the 1980s. It deals with him trying to work around the system to help AIDS patients, including himself, get a protease inhibitor. He plays a guy who is he rides the bulls, and he's a hustler, and he's a cowboy, and it takes place in Dallas, his native home state. He lost I think 40 or 50 pounds for the role. And in many ways, it is that same kind of Sciviola, the hustler, the grifter, the charming kind of out on his luck McConaughey character. And as I said before, we're only now starting to see him play guys who have consequences, whereas there were more moral consequences in Mud. Here you're really seeing, what it is about a man coming to terms with his own life and unfortunately the loss of his own life. And you see he's playing a man who's not particularly intelligent or not stupid, but he's playing a man he is in denial of his own situation. And yet, as the film progresses, you can watch his own evolution, his own thinking and feeling. You do feel like there's a lot going on in that film. What do you think about Dallas Buyers Club?
Yeah, it's a good movie. I guess I just want to say that Jared Leto got a lot of crap because he was playing a trans man, I think, and they said, people were saying, "Oh, we should have got a real trans person," but I kind of recall Matthew McConaughey not getting any crap because, just like back in Dazed and Confused, it's like, oh, yeah, Matthew McConaughey, he's so good. It's like, why are you going to criticize him?
What do you think about Matthew McConaughey's performance in Dallas Buyers Club?
Yeah, it's so good. It's like no one even wants to criticize him. Even the woke people can't criticize him. It's like,
right, but it's a different performance from McConaughey. He's not really very cool. There's nothing cool in that performance.
Well, I always talk about I was talking about his core of normalcy he tries to put in his characters. Yeah, so that character in Dallas Buyers Club, he strikes me, like if you watch the movie, I feel anyway, he struck me as a very normal person who just happens to be gay and he happened to get AIDS and he's just got to deal with it. That's the character he's constructing, whereas Jared Leto, that's another good movie to watch for contrast. I mean, they both give good performances, but you look at Leto and he is trying to construct a person who basically is not him. I feel like his approach was like, oh yeah, I'm going to play somebody that I have absolutely nothing in common with, whereas McConaughey would never do that. He would say, well, this is what we have in common. I have stuff in common with everybody,
Well, and he really does find that commonality. It makes a character that would be a lot harder to follow. And just want to mention two other films from that same era, which is Wolf of Wall Street. It's a very small part, and that is much more of the traditional McConaughey goof. Do you remember that he plays? He's only in it for about 5 minutes, and it's Jordan Belfort's first boss or his second boss, and he does this whole scene where he thumps his chest, and apparently and there's an interview with him in Lincoln Film Center where he talks about the line about the dialogue for the character was just so off the hook because here's a man who has no censor, who'll just say and do what he wants. So apparently that whole thump thing, McConaughey just improvised it. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's a great movie. I've given nothing away about the movie. He's only in it for 5 minutes. But the guy he plays, this coked up 80s hyper super executive, is just it's probably one of my favorite farcically funny characters that he plays. It's so over the top.
Yeah, it's great. And I'll just say something weird about it is he is only in the beginning, I think. And he is so good in that scene in the beginning that you're just waiting for him to come back.
You're waiting for Benny,
because
never
it's
does.
like, why would they take the time to construct this amazing character and not bring him back? Well, it's just McConaughey. Yeah. McConaughey just took the time to construct. McConaughey took the time to construct an amazing character like that lasted 3 pages or whatever. And everybody in the movie, I guess, is grateful, but it's like he practically overshadowed everybody else in the movie. It's pretty bad, but it's a great movie. I love that movie.
It's a great movie. I think you can possibly rent it on YouTube, or you can rent it on. It's not on any of the streaming services I could find, but I think for not a lot of money you can rent it, and it's a great performance by Margot Robbie and Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a very funny and entertaining Martin Scorsese film. Another film, it's not on the list because again I couldn't find any streaming service that have it, but from that same era is Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Where Matthew McConaughey plays an astronaut who gets involved in travel and time paradox. I feel like the astronaut in many ways is just another version of the cowboy. Wouldn't you say?
I'm not sure what you're getting at, but there was a famous director, I think an Indian director, who said all movies are Westerns.
Maybe so, but that's a broad generalization that I don't think is where we're talking about here. Whereas the cowboy character is a man who's willing to leave society, go on his own, so that society can survive. He goes out into uncharted places, confident and facing danger, and that you kind of see that. But I agree with you that the normalcy that he finds in the man he's playing is so grounded. Again, and I think you're right. I think we're really starting to see. You see it in Dallas Buyers Club. You see it in a lot of things you're saying. He's once again playing the most human being possible in one of the most surrealist films possible. The metaphysical paradoxes of that movie I can't even mention because that's a whole show.
Well, it's interesting. You like to, I've noticed over the years, you like to describe certain actors, the characters they play as the dude, or they're playing a dude, and you described McConaughey like that earlier. And I think what you're getting at is, there are very few actors that can just seem like a normal person, which is because these people live such rarefied lives, a lot of them. And
well, the dude is like a guy who's a stoner, a drunk, a guy who's kind of not really fully there. He's a modern day American fool, is what I mean by the dude. But the dude is a real guy, and he exists in our real lives. He's not so far above us that we don't know. We all know dudes in our life, and McConaughey's ability to remind us of that guy, of that kind of guy, is awesome. But the last film that I have, or it's not even a film that you can watch at home, and you and I are humongous fans of this, is True Detective season 1.
Season 1.
Just season 1. Just season 1. But his performance, it's him and Woody Harrelson, and it has an even stranger structure than Interstellar, which is saying something. But it touches upon, in so many ways, it really does touch upon all the things that we've been talking about as far as characters. Because if memory serves me right, it spans, 20 years?
I don't know.
10 years? It's a crime story. And it takes place in Louisiana. And Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey are partners. They're detectives who have to solve a murder. And how would you describe the character that McConaughey plays?
Well, he plays two characters. He because they're going through two different time periods.
He plays the same character.
But like 20 years later or whatever. And him 20 years later is completely different from him like when he's younger. So what kind of person is he? Well, he's he's totally different. I feel, and you know, McConaughey. You know, the great thing, you know, McConaughey is one of the elements that really makes that season really great, because McConaughey really understands that he needs to show with his performance, you know, just what the years have done to this person. And McConaughey, and you watch it, you know, McConaughey more than almost any other actor you've ever seen is able to do that with his performance. I mean, there's lots of projects, you know, where
That's true. He's a very straight arrow guy in the early 90s. And then by the time we get to, you know, whatever it is in the present day, he's completely he is the dude again. You know, his hair is long. He's smoking cigarettes. He's no longer a cop. He's no longer a detective. He no longer gives a rat's ass.
Well, he's broken, though. He's broken inside.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
and then it keeps on flashing backwards and forwards in time. So almost you would argue his performance is a mystery, because you're trying to figure out, how did the guy that we're meeting in one era in time become the guy in the other era in time? How did these two people coexist? And what happened to get him from this place
right?
To where he
you know,
is
I'll
now?
say something else. Like that first season, it was well written, okay? But there were things that should have been written that weren't written, okay? So for instance, why is McConaughey so broken? I mean, they don't really. I mean, it's.
Oh no! You see it as the story progresses.
Yeah, but not everything. Okay, not everything, but
you see enough to know. You see enough to get what's going on.
There's a little bit of implication, but McConaughey's performance is what really opens the window for the viewer onto what the years have done to this person. And without McConaughey's performance, I mean. People talk about Kevin Spacey in what is it, Ultimate Usual Suspects, okay? So Kevin Spacey, you know, this is a good contrast because they're both very similar projects, okay? Kevin Spacey is trying to give an interrogation room performance where you're trying to understand this character and things that have happened or whatever. And, you know, the scripts are different. They're two different intentions. So, you know, they're not totally comparable. But McConaughey, this is very similar to True Detective. It's an interrogation room performance, and McConaughey is trying to convey to the viewer just what's going on with this character, what has happened to this character, you know, what the experience has done to this character. And McConaughey is like about 1,000,000 times better than Kevin Spacey.
Right, and you get to see the two big archetypes of McConaughey. You get to see, again, the guy who's loose and out of it, and you get to see the guy who is in control and menacing. And you even get to see the guy who's vulnerable and likable. Actually, they cut a scene where you see why his marriage failed, and you can find it on YouTube.
Oh, really? I haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah, it's a really beautiful scene of him and his wife just deciding to break up, and it's kind of almost like you're watching the 1990s Matthew McConaughey literally morph into the 2010s Matthew McConaughey over a series of several episodes. But that one scene really sums it up. But in general, I think it's just one of his most challenging work. A film I just want to mention, but I have not seen, is Gold. Apparently, it's one of his favorite performances. It's based on a character that he used his father as a template. I saw the trailer. He definitely looks completely different.
It's based on. I've seen it. It's based on a true story. It's a fun story. All the performances are great, but I mean, I don't know. Does
he have a wig on or something? His hair is all.
I don't
weird.
know. It's an interesting movie. I mean, it's not.
You liked it?
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's not that great. I mean, it's based on a true story. I mean, it's a fun story, whatever, but it's an adventure.
Okay.
I mean,
did you see The Gentleman?
Yes, I've seen The Gentleman. I don't like it.
How was his performance? Okay. So
how was his performance? He's great. He's always great.
Great.
Can I just say one more thing about True Detective?
Absolutely.
Like his performance. See, if you compare like the other seasons of True Detective, which totally suck, by the way, but if you compare it, you will see that that one of the problems, I think, with the other seasons is there's not an actor like Matthew McConaughey that is informing the audience just with their performance about what the characters are going through, what they've been through, their experiences. I mean, who's the guy that was he's a Favreau guy, you know? The tall Favreau guy, you know, from
I know you from Swingers. Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn. Everybody in Hollywood loves him for some reason. I guess he's a nice guy. He was actually good in this action movie about where he's in prison. But, you know, Vince Vaughn you got to say it. He's just not as good an actor as McConaughey. I mean, who is really? But Vince Vaughn has to carry. Vince Vaughn has a very similar role. I think it was in season 3 of True Detective.
Season 2.
Okay, so he has a very similar role to McConaughey in season 2 in that he has to carry the season.
Yeah.
And you're constantly watching it. I was watching it. I'm trying to look. I'm looking at Vaughn, looking for a window into what's going on in this character, and I never see it. I never see it. Vaughn is totally cryptic, and he's not supposed to be. Okay, it's because Vaughn can't do what McConaughey's doing. When you watch, you will see it. When you watch season 1 True Detective, and McConaughey's sitting in there in the interrogation room, and he's like, he's acting his ass off. You can feel this character. You can feel the torment inside of this character. You watch Vaughn's performance, you don't know what the hell Vaughn's doing.
Yeah.
It's totally a puzzle. I mean,
but this is really, I get where you're going now. I totally get where you're going, which is that I think the thing about McConaughey is there are always, if you look at his best work, there's always multiple things going on in each performance. His performance is always nuanced and layered. There's always the first, either he plays guys who are really together, and you could argue actually True Detective can be viewed almost this way. He is good at playing guys who are either very together who slowly fall apart, or guys who look like a mess who really get it together. And depending on how you're watching True Detective, you're really getting to see both going on at the same time. And I think, you're never going to see a Matthew McConaughey film where it isn't going to at least touch on that element of being either a really together guy who's slowly falling apart, or a guy who really looks like a mess who really gets it back. Because whenever you see Matthew McConaughey in any performance, I think the thing that is always clear about him is this is a man who is either completely out of control to an extreme, or here's a guy who's got it so locked down it's frightening. He's a guy of polarities. That he has, as you say, the ability to mind humanity is what makes him not Kevin Spacey. It gives him, he can, because no matter how extreme he goes in either direction, you always think that is a guy I've met in my life. Maybe I didn't meet him on his best day, and maybe I didn't meet him on his worst day, but that is a guy that I've met in real life. And you can feel that McConaughey draws his people from humanity.
All right. I just want to say about Spacey that, I do think Spacey is a good actor. It's just probably McConaughey's better.
Oh, it's not that Spacey's a bad actor or a good actor. It's just that when he plays those extremes, you always feel a certain cool detachment. And you go, I've never met anyone like that in my own life. There's a lot of great character actors who can play people who are not realistic, but they are the people from our dreams, or they're the people from our nightmares. And McConaughey doesn't do that. He doesn't play people who are, no matter how over the top he gets in any direction, as you say, I think you find that there's a basic humanity. I think the only time that he's really not a great actor, and it's you can look at the late 90s through the mid-aughts, is when he's just playing people that feel like you would never meet them in real life. The perfect boyfriend, the attorney with great moral principles. He can never play the guy who doesn't exist. If he's playing a character who doesn't exist in our world, and he can't convince us that character exists in our world, which is true of maybe many actors, but he doesn't do iconic. He really has to be grounded.
Okay, are we done with the McConaughey episode?
That was my last words. What do you?
Okay, I have one
final thoughts.
I
on
want
McConaughey.
My final thing is I just want to ask you a question, because I don't think you answered this question before, but because I asked it in the beginning, why a show on Matthew McConaughey? Maybe we've already answered that question.
Do you have any final thoughts? But is there anything, like when you now look at his films, anything that now you think about when you look at the stretch from Dazed and Confused to whatever is the last McConaughey performance that you really like?
Why are you not answering my question? Okay, but
I think his career tells a story. I think his career tells a story. And I think if you watch these films, you can watch the evolution of a guy who is learning his craft to having Hollywood tell him what kind of actors, what kind of roles to play, to finding his own voice, and finding where he fits best and learning how to bring his tools to his performance. And that's why I chose McConaughey, because there's many actors who've had careers of great lengths, and you can do this with actors you admire. I just feel that the arc of his career and the journey of his talents can be watched clearly and cleanly and distinctively. And then you have the opportunity to watch him grow in front of you over this period of time in a series of films that touch upon almost every genre.
Okay, you do have a point. I mean, you could put like a Matthew McConaughey film festival together where you watch him become a better actor over the years, and there are very few actors in Hollywood where you could actually do that.
Yeah. In fact, normally it's just the opposite. You can normally see them go from their high to then that slow descent back. I wish I had a more recent Matthew McConaughey film to poke at the end, but I still feel I still like to believe that he's on the ascent. I hope his next film, whenever that comes out, is a good film, and I look forward to watching it. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching what was a slightly longer version. The original computer that I was using to record myself, the battery died on it, so I had to switch over to my iPhone. So I'm sorry if there's a lack of continuity on here. Thank you, Randall, for doing the editing. I just wanted to say to people watching, if you have any suggestions about future areas of arts and entertainment you'd like us to discuss, leave your comments in the comments section. I'd love to know what kind of a film retrospective you would put together. Who are your directors or your writers or genres or actors that you want to build a film festival on, and tell us about it. And if you have any other questions or comments, please, please, please leave them. We want to get a rapport going with you. Anything else, Randall?
That's it.
Well, then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Be safe and be well. Bye.